Happy Wednesday, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Petovich here at WCNC. Welcome to Live Impact Weather today. Kind of an interesting day. We actually have a rare summer cool front, and I'm going to say this just as a term because it's not really that much cooler behind it. It's basically a dry line, which means we're going to have much drier air. We're already starting to see some of that in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, but the surface, you may not be feeling it yet, so the dew points are still pretty high out there. Let's take a live look outside. We can look at our Dallas cam, and this kind of tells you, boy, that's a pretty view. I mean, look at the blue skies above. That tells me immediately we have drier air in the mid and upper levels. At the surface, we still have some moisture because, as you can see, especially looking, that one's west of Charlotte looks like the storm that we're going to keep an eye on in Anson County. That is a huge cumulonimbus cloud off in the distance. So off to the left there, let's see if I can grab my cursor. This might be easier if I can illustrate on the screen. So right above my head in the view, that's just a regular cumulus cloud. But what we can see is, I'm going to grab my cursor. Hopefully it works. We'll see if I can actually get this to work. Off to the, there we go, right there. This one right there, that looks like the cumulonimbus cloud over towards Anson County. And the reason I say that right there, that is Charlotte. So this little guy wire, we call it, is actually, it's kind of just the irony. It's right in the view of Uptown. But that storm right there is over in parts of Anson County. And I'm going to flip to our Anson County camera here real quickly and kind of show you the view of that storm from Lylesville. So look at that thing. That is a cloud burst if you ever seen one. And one of the things I noticed about this, as James brought it up and kind of moved the camera for me, you can see something interesting here. You see the rain shaft. So when you see stuff like this, this is the rain shaft. But look on the edge. If you see it bell out, kind of looping like that, that's usually indication of a downburst, or in some cases we refer to as a microburst if it's on the small scale side. And we'll be talking more about that in the show here in a minute. But what's happening is the rain and wind is coming down, and then it hits the ground and spreads out and curls up like that. And so when we see that on the edges of these rain shafts, that's a sign of a downburst or a microburst. Sometimes you can see it on both edges. You'll see it curl like that. So that's actually the rain shaft. But remember, the rain is dragging cold air to the surface, so you can end up seeing some pretty good wind with that as well. And let me show you what this looks like on radar. We'll go right to the radar view here. It's kind of a delay there, but that's the view in Anson County. So Anson County is under what we call a special weather statement. So over Charlotte, not a lot going on, but let me zoom in on this cell north of Wadesboro. I'm going to pause this because it's looping like crazy. So that's what it looks like on the radar. You see Lylesville there to the east of Wadesboro? That's where that camera was, and we had oriented it back towards the northwest. So that's what that cell looks like on the reflectivity. Reflectivity is just showing us where heavy rain, hail, or stuff like that is. But we can look at the velocity data here, and I'm going to flip between a couple different sources. And you can see some of those brighter shades of red in there. That tells me there's some pretty good wind in there. I wouldn't say it's a strong downburst or microburst because it's probably at 40, 45 mile an hour winds. But if it gets up to 58 mile per hour winds, then we would be more concerned with the potential for damage, and that's when you'd see a warning issue. And speaking of warnings, we'll kind of widen this out. While we're pretty quiet here in the southern Piedmont, we can head over to central North Carolina. We did have some warnings earlier, but it looks like they mostly have expired. But those storms are pushing out towards the coast, and if we look at the wider view, you'll see the cold front. Look at all the storms on the coast right now. These things are pushing out towards the east, and that's all ahead of a pretty good summer cool front, as I mentioned. I hate to call it a cold front. And it has caused some flooding. This is out in Duck in the Outer Banks, and you can see you're pretty much at sea level. Drainage is not always great. So when you get a heavy downpour, you tend to see the sewer system back up a little bit, and you tend to see rain like that. But James brought that up, and that's in the village of Duck out there. Beautiful area. And that place is going to be packed this weekend, James,
sure is,
as people are going out to the coast. So, yeah, that's something that is pretty much an everyday occurrence when you go out to the coast. But look at that line of showers and storms, and you can see how it's kind of flaring up right over the Outer Banks. So that's the front that's moving through. Now, I joked yesterday that we probably would be close to 90, maybe not hit 90 today. I'll show you the current temperatures. We were 89. And I was about to go on a rant in today's show because at 4:30 we got the climate summary and it said the high was 89. I was like, oh, not that I want this streak to go on of 90-degree days, but I'm like, if we're going to hit 89, why didn't it just be 90? Well, sure enough, at 5 o'clock the temperature jumped up and we hit 90 degrees. So guess what, everybody? You can get a card. There's probably a Hallmark card for this. We are 14 days in a row of 90 plus. The reason that's somewhat important, not that it's a big deal, it's just kind of a streak, is that we're probably going to extend the streak for a while, because going into the weekend, I expect to see 90 tomorrow, 90 plus for the 4th, 90 plus on Saturday. And then Sunday will be our next opportunity to break this streak. We could have enough clouds and showers develop late in the day for us to be 88, 89 again. So we're likely going to get to at least 17 days, I think, maybe longer. And that's going to put us at the longest streak since 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So we're getting into some pretty rare air. If we get to 18, that would put us in the top 10 longest streaks all time. So this weekend is going to be great. And for once, we can actually talk about some nice weather going into the weekend. I'll quickly show you the surface map, because that same front that's bringing us the drier air, it's going to do something else. And when Tim joins me here in a second, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. Possibly some tropical, subtropical mischief. Here's the thing, though. This is not going to be a big deal. I see a lot of people online going, "Oh, threats increasing, all this stuff." Guys, it's not going to be a big deal. This is not going to be a hurricane. It probably won't even be a tropical storm. There's a 40% chance of a tropical or subtropical system developing. So what does that mean to you and I? Nothing more than it just might get a name or a number. Is that it's going to have some impacts. It's going to increase rain chances on the coast, and probably more importantly for everybody going to the beaches or the coast this weekend and next week, not going to ruin your plans, but it is going to do something that's incredibly dangerous that probably we don't talk enough about, and that is rip currents. Rip currents are going to be pretty high starting tomorrow. It's moderate tomorrow, but Friday, Saturday, Sunday in the high range. And so that's dangerous. So just keep an eye out for those if you're going to the coast, because that thing lingering offshore could end up producing some pretty good swells and some rip currents, and that's something that could be problematic if you're heading out that way. I'm going to show you quickly our 5-day rainfall forecast, because it kind of illustrates also the stalled front today, but also the fact that that system could bring some enhanced rainfall chances along the coast. So when we look at the 5-day, thanks for taking my head out of the way there, James. Kind of
I need to be able to put your head on the left
I know,
side.
I was like, I was in the wrong spot there, but that's good. So this kind of shows you the 5-day forecast for us, not much, but you notice all the rain was on the coast, and that's partially because today's stalled front, but also that tropical system, which could linger there. But I'll be honest with you, I'll show you the 7-day rainfall forecast, which will kind of highlight where all the rain is going to be over the next 7 days, the QPF we call it. It's going to show. It's going to take a second to load here, but over the next 7 days, we could have some pretty heavy coastal rainfall, and most of it's offshore. That's why if I'm going like deep sea fishing, or I'm going on those fishing charters, that would be more problematic than being at the beach, because, and I don't know why it's just taking forever to load, but we'll try it one more time. But there will be a ton of rainfall just offshore and possibly over parts of Florida. Maybe it's rained so much the KML file doesn't want to load, but yeah, tons of rain mostly offshore, but near the coast, if there's any shift in whatever that little wobbling low does, and it could bring some of that moisture back closer to us. So that's going to be kind of a big story for the weekend and next week if you're going to the coast. So quickly, here's our local forecast. I'll throw this up just to give you an idea for the holiday weekend, because this is by far the most important thing. We are going to be mostly dry. So we are going to see lower humidity, which is going to be a dry heat. So even though mid and lower 90s the next couple of days, the dew points in the low 60s actually will feel pretty good. And because of that, it actually could help it feel pretty comfortable once you're in the shade. So coming up in a couple of minutes, we'll talk about the national weather, more on this tropical system. We'll get into lightning and microbursts coming up with Tim Buckley in just a few seconds. All right, welcome back, and I want to join to the show Tim Buckley from our sister station, WFMY, up in the Greensboro area. And you had a busy day yesterday, Tim. We were kind of a little bit calmer down this way. How'd you guys make out yesterday with all those storms?
Yeah, hey, Brad, good to see you down there in Charlotte. And, sometimes it works out that way, sometimes it works out the opposite way. But our weather was a little bit different up here. We had more of those showers and thunderstorms that popped up in our area. We were expecting it, and we kind of called for a widespread thunderstorm kind of a day. But even still, it took them a while to get going. But once we get past 6, 7, 8 o'clock last night, there was just so much lightning around, a lot of downpour rain. And we did have a fair number of storm reports of some isolated trees down, but it wasn't so much a severe storm thing other than just, wow, it's storming a whole lot. And we had all this lightning that people keep talking about. And then that regeneration that I think you had back in the Charlotte area, where that late night time frame around 11 to midnight and 1 a.m., you got that second line of storms that just seemed spiteful, like it just wanted us not to get any sleep last night, kind of noisy, kept the dogs up and everything. And that continued a little bit into today, didn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of the worst, those overnight storms for a lot of people, because if you have dogs or kids that are sensitive to that thunder, it keeps them up all night. And it was a loud night because we did have some pretty good thunder boomers going here for a while. We've actually got a pretty good image of one right now over in Anson County, our Lylesville camera. The one single cell that we're kind of keeping an eye on, and it looks pretty cool, Tim. We've got kind of almost looked like a downburst signature briefly there. It didn't look very strong, but a good example of what's frustrating as meteorologists this time of year. Underneath that rain shaft, somebody's getting an absolute deluge right now. And just to the west and east, there's barely any rainfall, and its sun could even be out. And that's kind of the frustrating thing about these pop-up storms. You hear it, I hear it. People say they live in a bubble. Where's this rain? It's pouring at my house. It's not pouring out. But that's kind of the nature of these afternoon storms.
And I don't think people quite realize, because, we all live in one place, we work in one place, our house is in one place. You might not be moving about the whole area or ever looking at a radar. But when you see an image like that, it just tells the story, because you see the downpour, and then just on the other side of it, there's nothing going on. So we joke about it a lot, but that's just the way it is this time of year, where those storms can really be hit or miss. The nice thing about last night is that almost everybody got some rain. Some of these days, boy, you can get missed 7 days in a row while your neighbor is getting hit, 7 out of 8 times, and their tomatoes are doing great and yours are fizzling out, right?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things you noticed, and we're going to talk about this today, is we've had a lot of prolific lightning, I feel like, since the beginning of June, which has been kind of interesting, because I looked back in May. We had a very wet May. I know you guys had a wet May as well. We got out of the drought. But what was kind of ironic about May, we had all this rain, and there wasn't a ton of thunderstorms. It was a lot of what we call stratiform rain. And then all of a sudden, June hits. And now June and into early July, we have had just tons of cloud-to-ground lightning strikes. In fact, you caught a great image yesterday up in Winston, Salem from one of your cameras, and we caught some great ones as well. The lightning has been pretty prolific the last couple of nights, and I think part of it has been we've had a lot of nighttime storms too, which makes it easier to kind of see some of these. Talk a little bit about the lightning pictures you guys have gotten over the last couple of days.
Yeah, and this was just kind of a lucky shot. We have some of these time-lapse cameras that we roll on or run on, and they don't always get a good bolt. You might see a flash, but this one captured it right exactly. This was about 7:30 last night in Winston-Salem, and if you look closely, you see those little tiny lights in the foreground. That's the Winston-Salem Dash Stadium. So here in the Triad, we have 3 different minor league teams: Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point. All 3 of them had games get messed up by these storms last evening, and this just kind of shows you the impact of those storms. They rolled right in, people were in the concourses, and boy, oh boy, those lightning strikes just came in at just the wrong time. But a lot of them, it's that heat and humidity that we're getting now that we didn't have earlier. It's just more friction, right? More upward motion, and that's something that's been continuing today. Every now and then I've been looking at the kind of the lightning counter across the Carolinas. Regularly, there's been about 700 to 800 strikes every 15 minutes. So there's still a lot of that going on, mostly out east, it seems like. I know they had some flooding problems out in Dare County this afternoon.
Yeah, we were showing this camera right here from Duck, and it looks like some water on the roadway there. It's always tough out there, as I would kind of jokingly said, you're so close to sea level, the drainage isn't great to begin with. So when you get a heavy downpour, you're going to get some street flooding. So that's a view right now out in Duck in the Outer Banks, some flooding. You can see that right lane that's pretty soaked and not a lot of drainage going on there. They did have a flash flood warning for a while there. That storm was sitting right over there. But speaking of the lightning, lightning's been a big talker because we've had so much of it. It's caused issues at the airports. We had a lightning strike down in Columbia last week that hit 18 people in the water. Here's the lightning map from June 1st through this morning. And you'll see a couple things on this map. There's a lot of clustering around you guys up there and also near us.
Yeah.
North of Charlotte, there's a little peak, and then it looks like north of Winston, Salem, there's a little peak there. And then over towards Raleigh and then down towards Wilmington. But look at the number of strikes. 173,947 strikes were detected over the month of June. And that's just insane, Tim.
I almost feel like I should have beforehand, divide this by the number of days, the number of hours, the number of minutes and seconds, right, to see how many times you're getting these bolts to strike. But it almost seems like a typo, right, to have almost 200,000 lightning strikes in a month, but you could call it making up for lost time or whatever it is. But it just goes to show you how many of these are happening all the time. And we obviously had that tragic situation in South Carolina where all those people got struck last week. This is a danger. This is something that we're used to, because it's a normal part of life in the summertime in the Carolinas, so you don't think of it as being dangerous. But it sure is, and it's just a good reminder. Even on a day like today, right now, there's still, that's a live lightning map for you. There's plenty of lightning across most of the Carolinas at this time, and so if you hear that thunder, you're just close enough to be getting struck. About 15 miles or so would be that rule of thumb. That's where that sound is going to travel, so keep that in mind. But boy, I love that stat. I didn't know that we could plot that for a whole month, so I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that's just amazing to see how much the atmosphere is working above our heads at any time, not just on these busy storm days, but even on those kind of routine. And I see you're pulling up this. I wanted to talk about this video you posted the other day, because I watched it multiple times because it was that good.
Yeah, this was pretty wild. This was the shot we had from an isolated storm, and we kind of had that side strike coming out of the storm. This was around 9:25. This is Monday night, wasn't this, James?
Yeah.
Got a mistake. So yeah, we actually slowed this down a couple of times, and that's one of those typical, not quite bolt from blue, but kind of shows you how far lightning can go out of the side of these storms. And it had several return strokes, which made me think this was a positive strike, because it was really unloading a lot of energy. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to track all the lightning strikes, because oftentimes, in your mind you think, boy, there's been a lot of lightning, or there hasn't been a lot of lightning. It's nice to look at the actual data and see, wow, we had a ton of lightning. And one of the images I wanted to show you guys was, we're talking a lot about airport delays here in the last couple of days and really last week. And part of it's because we are in the midst of thunderstorm season, but it's also one of the busiest travel times of the year. And I found this cool chart showing which of the top 20 airports in the country are impacted by lightning the most. You see two foreign airports, one in China and one in Singapore, but number 3, 4, and 5 with lightning impacts are Orlando, Dallas, and Hartsfield, which is Atlanta. So if you travel through any three of those airports in the summertime, this will give you a really good idea on why you have issues with lightning. And lightning, in and of itself, it doesn't really damage the planes, but one of the things, and I'm going to be talking to Charlotte Douglas International here in the next week about how it impacts ground operations. Lightning at the airport means the people refueling your plane, restocking your plane, guiding your plane, putting the luggage and baggage on the plane. None of those people are going to be outside when there's lightning within the airport range. So that means operations kind of come to a standstill. So I thought this lightning graphic was kind of important to show people how the impact on airports is so prolific from just lightning. And so you said you guys had some flight delays and ground stoppages yesterday, and we call them airport weather warnings. It sounds kind of weird, but they issue those mainly because of the lightning, Tim.
Yeah, and it's really amazing to see just that ranking and how far up Charlotte is. Interesting to see Chicago up there too. Anytime those ground stoppages happen, it's just domino after domino that starts to fall. And yeah, earlier today, even the Raleigh airport, I think they got put on a bit of a ground stop, and some of those flights were starting to divert. Some of them went to Richmond, some of them went here to Greensboro. We're only an hour down the road and have plenty of runway space, but that's something that they had to do on the fly over there, and it's just a fact of life in the summertime that these thunderstorms can be dangerous for those people working on the tarmacs and for the planes to fly too, with all the microburst concerns.
And so, yeah, we want to get into that because that's the other part of the story. Lightning causes issues at airports, but one of the most dangerous things for air travel with thunderstorms isn't, believe it or not, the lightning. It's what Tim just alluded to, the microburst or downburst. And really, before the advent of Doppler radar, planes used to crash quite a bit from downburst. And we actually have a story from the Charlotte area, which is one of those planes that actually was impacted by a downburst, one of several that happened in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s before Doppler radar. And these terminal Dopplers were widely installed across the country. And let's look back at the plane crash that happened, U.S. Airways crash that happened here in Charlotte due to a downburst.
It was summertime, hot.
What started as a routine short flight from Columbia to Charlotte,
the blue sky was replaced with darkness,
quickly turned dangerous. 116 approached the airport. It wasn't until long after families received the dreaded news about their loved ones that survivors learned a microburst, a thunderstorm with heavy wind and rain, caused the skies.
They just could not react to the tremendous amount of force from that downburst of high wind.
At the time, neither air traffic control nor the flight crew really knew what they were getting into. The pilots were in the process of trying to land when they realized it was unsafe in those conditions and were going around for another approach.
The pilots got lulled into a situation where, because they could see the airport, they really didn't factor in the severity of the weather.
Gregory Fife investigated the crash for the National Transportation Safety Board. While Doppler radar was available to local TV news viewers back then, air traffic controllers did not have access.
That may have been the difference in getting the crew to abort the landing sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so looking back at 1994 when that plane crash happened. And Tim, I think this is the hidden danger of thunderstorms that pilots didn't really understand until Dr. Ted Fujita studied microbursts, and then they installed these airports and wind shear detection. Talk a little bit and explain how these microbursts and downbursts from a thunderstorm are so dangerous to air travel.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, and it's really scary to think about, before, like you were saying, before they were as detectable as they are to us nowadays. But let's talk about it. What is a microburst? You probably heard about it on the news. Maybe you've heard Brad or myself talk about it before. So think about how a thunderstorm works in the first place. So when we have a thunderstorm, looks like I've lost my graphic here for just a second. We're going to get it back. Don't you worry. Look at that lovely live radar just there. So anyway, back to the microburst graphic. The way a thunderstorm works in the first place is you start by having a big cloud. Thunderstorms are formed by an updraft in the first place. That's that upward moving air. But on the flip side of the storm, you're going to have a downdraft that comes out the other side. So I guess I don't have that graphic popped up one more time. I'm going to load it up here. But thunderstorms are made of upward air on one side and then downward air on the other side. So as that kind of goes, if you're an airplane flying into this and you run into that first part where that air is going up, you're going to maybe overcorrect a little bit. And then on the other side, that downward forcing air could cause you to just go in the total opposite direction. So if you make that correction, then you're in a really, really bad place because you've already gone in the wrong direction, and then it's going to push you down even more closer to the ground. So these microbursts, they're really small, just a number of miles, but when it comes to these airplanes flying through a situation, if you didn't know that was there, I think that can be, like Brad was saying, the cause of a lot of that throughout the history.
Yeah, and I think we take for granted how safe flying is now because we detect these. And, this is why there's so many delays in the summer. You don't want to fly into these things. And you talk to any pilot, they will say this is the thing that scares them to death. They will not go near a thunderstorm because the microbursts, the hail, and those up and down drafts are just something you can't account for as a pilot. Now, one of the reasons we know so much about these now has been the advent of Doppler radar. And Doppler radar was this great new tool that allowed us not just to see where rain was, Tim, but it allowed us to see the wind speed and the direction, which was really important. And here in Charlotte, we were lucky that, even though we don't have a National Weather Service radar here, the FAA installed what's called a terminal Doppler radar. It's a much weaker, smaller radar, but it specifically is designed to detect downbursts and microbursts. It does a really good job of that. It suffers in other things, and we struggle with coverage. But the radars really have been a lifesaver, and the coverage of them is so crucial to aviation and severe weather here in the Carolinas.
It's just amazing, when we're living in a certain time now. It's just mind-boggling to think back to before they existed. And I guess, you never have that option. It's like the same thing we think about when it comes to hurricanes. How did they do it before satellites? Technology is such a huge part of what we do now in the weather enterprise that it's a bit scary to think about how things used to be. And it kind of also shows you how important it is that we keep making these awesome tools going forward to even get a little bit better. Maybe somewhere in the future, 20, 30 years from now, we'll say, gosh, can you remember when they couldn't tell the difference between there's a tornado here and not a tornado over there? Hopefully we continue to get better tools going forward, because it's wild to think about things without Doppler radar.
Yeah, and people always ask me, what's the next thing coming down the line? These radars, believe it or not, we call them WSR 88Ds, which, the 88 stand for when they were developed. 1988, folks, okay? It's 2025. Yeah. Now, most of them were installed in the early 90s, even though they developed in 1988. But the next thing is going to be phased array radar, which is if you saw the movie Twisters, that's the one part of the movie that was actually somewhat, very scientifically true. Phased array radars are going to be the future, but they're still probably a decade plus away. And the cool thing about phased array, it's actually similar to the radars they use to shoot down missiles with the military. It's what they use to track missiles. And so that technology is coming down the pipe. And it's really another reason why any cuts to research or funding that we've been talking about with NOAA is part of the reason we're so concerned about as meteorologists. These are things that have happened over the decades that have made us better at forecasting the weather, and to see them go away would be problematic down the road. One of the things we're working on locally in the Carolinas is trying to get more of those radars, not less of them, and so that's why it's such an important thing that we have Doppler radar, and we'd love to see more of them across the area. Now, I see you brought up our coastal system, Tim. I don't know how many questions you've gotten about our potential tropical system on the coast, but it's kind of interesting that chances have gone up to 40%. I think the impacts will be minimal, but not zero on the coast. What have you been talking to viewers about heading to the coast? Not so much this weekend, but probably next week.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like people are too freaked out about it, which is good, because I don't think you should be. But anytime there's that headline of a possible development, you might get a little anxious, certainly if you're spent money on a beach trip. Still go, enjoy all those things, but there is possibility that the same front that moves through our area right now and today and tomorrow kind of stalls out over the Gulf Stream, and that's just offshore of the Carolinas. So when that happens, you could get low pressure that develops. Looks like Sunday, Monday would be that time frame we would probably watch most closely. Some model trends today are kicking up some rain for the beaches on Sunday. It wouldn't be a tropical storm or anything like that, but it might be something that could put a little bit of a damper on your Sunday beach plans. But either way, still go if you're heading out there. If anything, just another reason for us probably to talk about rip currents. I was noticing the map today. There were some high rip current risks already along the Carolina coast, unrelated, but just something we never can talk about enough, because boy, oh boy, those things kill more people than most types of weather in the Carolinas do.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about that in our weather segment locally today. Rip currents and heat, the two things that I don't think we cover enough as far as weather, fatalities. It really is two of the things that are the most dangerous out there. So, yeah, don't cancel your beach plans, folks. Just pay attention. It's one of those things, maybe you have a little bit higher chance of rain and those rip current risks going into the weekend. But thanks again for joining us today. Don't go anywhere. Coming up next, we're going to have more on WCNC Plus and WFMY Plus. We're going to have Vanessa Rufus in here talking with today's news and everything else going on across the country. Stick around.